far advanced.
All right.
Go ahead.
Well, we're going to start with Michael in Florida. Thanks for waiting. You're on with Don and Matt.
Hi.
Hey.
Yeah, I was just calling because I'm not a believer in God, but I believe that we have a soul or some kind of, you could call it just a subconscious, but there's something there that helps us.
It's curious because I think Don and I would both agree that we have a part of our mind that is correctly labeled as a subconscious, and neither of us would agree that we have anything that would be correctly labeled a soul.
So are you referring to something that sort of lives beyond our physical bodies?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know of any evidence for that. Do you?
Well, personally, whenever I was a kid, first of all, I was probably still in training pants. And my brother, he was 5 years older. He took the mattress off the bed in the bedroom we were playing. He put it under the bed, and he made a little tiny gap between it and the wall. He was trying to fit in there. He couldn't fit. And as little as I was, I knew that I could fit in that little hole. So, and I crawled in that hole. All of a sudden, he grabs a hold of the bed and kicked with his legs and shoved the mattress into me, into the wall, as hard as he could. I was probably 2, 3 at the oldest. All of a sudden, him, the mattress, the bed, me, we all flew backwards away from the wall. So that to me is not just a subconscious. That's something else.
I don't understand what you're saying about what happened. So you crawled between a mattress and a wall, and your brother tried to squish you between the mattress and the wall, and then what happened?
And I was almost dead. I can remember blacking out. I couldn't breathe. It was like the boa constrictor. Every time I took a breath, I couldn't inhale less.
Okay, so you're being squished, and this lack of oxygen begins to deprive your brain of oxygen, and you start to pass out. What the hell's that got to do with the soul?
Because what made the whole mattress, my brother and me, the whole bed, everything flew away from the wall? What did that? A 2, 3-year-old kid or something else?
I have no idea, but first of all, I don't believe that happened.
Okay.
I believe that you're convinced that it happened, but you're talking about, how old are you now?
I'm 58.
58?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're talking about a 56-year-old memory that you've massaged over the years. Why on earth would you think it's accurate? Hell, I don't remember anything from when I was 2 or 3, but I can tell you things that happened to me when I was 16, which I know I'm wrong about.
Well, I understand that. A lot of times people are wrong, mistaken. Sure, stories change over the years. But this is something that happened that I'm never going to forget. Why would I change a story to myself?
Because we all do that.
This story,
we all do that.
Okay,
we know that memory is faulty, and I'm not saying that you're intentionally changing the story. I'm not accusing you of
deception,
intentional deception. It's just what we do. But, you know, first of all, we have no way of investigating this or testing it or whatever else. And all I have is a really vague description of the bed and everything flew away from the wall. Well, for all I know, your parent came in and yanked the bed away in order to rescue you, and you were unconscious, and then they drug your brother out to punish him or whatever else and laid you on the bed, and then your brain. It reminds me of near-death experiences that people claim to have. Because what actually happens...
It wasn't that.
Okay. Congratulations, Dr. Michael. I'm glad you've determined it wasn't a near-death experience.
I didn't almost die. I almost passed out, more like what you said the first time.
Now, hang on, because I bet if we rewind this call, I'm the one that said you almost passed out, and you said you almost died. I bet if we rewind the call, that's exactly what was said.
I almost passed out. I said it's more like that. I almost passed out. I don't think I almost died. I think I was going to die if it had kept up. And my mother came in afterwards because she didn't know what happened. I don't know what made a noise. I don't know. You're right. But
maybe your brother pulled the bed away from the wall.
Here's another theory. You were afraid, and you had a burst of adrenaline, and you pushed it.
Exactly. But I don't think that a 2-year-old kid usually does stuff like that. Usually they die. That's the first time.
2-year-old kids aren't usually being squished to death. So, of course, we're under an exceptional... But here, what the hell does any of that have to do with the soul? Because what you really have is a memory of an event that may or may not be accurate, and something that happened that you don't have an explanation for. How did you get to a soul from that?
Because that's just the first one. I'll give you 2 more examples. That was
I don't, Michael. I don't need
You
any.
need a plural of the anecdote.
I don't need 10 examples that have nothing to do with the soul. I want an explanation of how this got you to the notion of a soul.
Because I'm just saying that there's something there that keeps us alive, keeps us going, even when we're unable to comprehend the whole world around us.
And yet people die every second.
Right. Sometimes it happens, yeah. But the majority of times, most people have an instinct for survival, something that keeps them going. Even when they're a kid and
I agree we have an instinct for survival. What the hell does that have to do with the soul?
Because, like I said, if you let me finish, there's another time when I was in
I don't need an... Here's the thing, Michael. This is what you're not getting. I agree with you. We have an instinct for survival. That's what our brain does. If there's nothing about the first story that necessitates a soul, then let's admit that first story is not in any way evidence for a soul.
Okay,
you don't get to add up 10 things. You don't get to add up 10 things that aren't evidence for the soul independently and claim that the 10 of them together are evidence for a soul. That's not the way evidence works.
I'm just saying I'm going to give you one from the beginning, from the middle, and recently. And if you don't want to hear them, that's fine. But the other 2 are not the same story.
Give us your very best one.
Okay.
And then tell me why you didn't start with the best one.
I'm just saying I started at the beginning, when I was a kid.
Okay, but
that's where it
Michael,
starts.
Are we at least in agreement that there's no evidence for a soul in that first story?
In the first story, sure. But if you put them all 3 together, then maybe you'll see it.
No. I just explained this. If I have one story that's not evidence for a soul, and then I present a second story that's not evidence for a soul, and a third story that's not evidence for a soul, I haven't come up with a combination of stories that's evidence for a fucking soul. That's not the way this works.
You're not listening to the other stories to know if they have anything to do with the soul. And like I said,
why didn't you? I tell you what, if I ask you what evidence do you have for a soul, and you tell me a story that has nothing to do with a soul, why the fuck would I listen to another story from you?
Because I'm saying the soul's the same as a subconscious, a guardian spirit, a soul, whatever you want to call it.
Those things aren't the same. Those just pretending.
They are.
Okay, congratulations.
We all have a subconscious.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So what would tell me whenever I was
instead of telling stories, why don't you say why you think that there's something supernatural here, or something that goes beyond our death?
Because I'm trying to tell you, but you keep refusing to listen to the other story.
Well, you should have led with it.
That's not an answer, sir. When Don asks you a question and you say, "I'm trying to tell you, but you won't let me," now all you're doing is pouting. Answer the question.
I'm not pouting, because if you don't want, what's the question? If you don't want to hear
what evidence do you have for a soul?
It's like I said, to me, you can consider your subconscious as a soul. It does more than just...
Okay. Sorry.
When we need to have... We're going to do a special episode of the show where we talk about what the fuck evidence is.
Yeah, we need to do that.
Because when I ask for evidence and you say, well, we can view the subconscious as a soul, I no longer give a shit. Because, you know what, I can view this bottle of Coke Zero as God. I can view this phone as peanut butter. I'd be wrong, but I can do it. That's not evidence. Telling me that you're convinced that the subconscious is a soul is not evidence of anything other than you believe this. And the thing we're trying to get to is, why do you believe it? Why do you think that this is true? And why should anybody else believe it? If somebody had called up and said, oh, I've got evidence for a soul, and then they, when asked for evidence of the soul, said, well, you could look at the soul as if it's just your self-conscious, or subconscious, sorry.
No.
That's not evidence. Why would you call in and say you have evidence for something, or that you have a reasoned belief for something, and then just say, oh, because basically what you're saying there is, I like the notion of a soul. I don't actually have any evidence of a soul or anything that's going to exist beyond us, and so I'm going to look around at the things that I don't have an explanation for, like consciousness and subconscious and weird circumstances where you might be passed out and something strange happens. And so you're taking all of these things that you don't have an explanation for and saying, I could look at that and say it's a soul. Well, congratulations.
Yeah. You
can do that with anything. That doesn't get us to evidence, and it's not how you go about showing that something's
real. A lot of the
real.
soul stuff seems to be wishful thinking, right? Of I'm gonna see my relatives, when I die, and they're still with me. These sorts of things. The idea of a soul is comforting, but it's wishful thinking. All evidence that we have is that when your brain dies, you die, and there's no more to it.
Yeah, I've pointed out, I don't know, a gazillion times now that the soul is the single most dead concept in all of theology because of what we know about the brain. We don't know everything about the brain, but it's like if I'm rolling a die, and it's a standard six-sided die, half of what you would roll at a craps table, and it comes up a 4. You know, we roll it, boom, it's a 4. And somebody says, why did that dice roll come up a 4? And your answer is, I have a guardian angel who, when I roll the dice, makes sure that it lands on 4 when I need it to land on 4. You've come up with an unfalsifiable proposition that might be comforting. It's the same thing we do with lucky socks and rabbit's feet. It's about confirmation bias and stuff like that. And so if we pick up that die and we roll it again, and it comes up a 2, what? My guardian angel didn't make it come up a 4 because we didn't need it to come up a 4 then.
That's right.
That's what's going on. And so when we look at the soul, in a die roll, there's no room left to reasonably posit external influence. We know about physics, we know about die roll, we can measure this, we know that the odds on a standard six-sided die is that 1 out of 6 times it's going to land on this specific number. We can roll them and roll them and roll them and roll them and simulate it and everything else, and they fall into this normative distribution for fair dice. That's just what happens. So there's no room left in a die roll to say, an angel made it land that way. There's no room left in the things that we identify or used to label as the soul. Given what we know about the brain and how it functions, about how our memories are malleable, our personalities are malleable, everything about you can be reset. You can get amnesia. Everything can fundamentally change.
Yep.
You can sever the corpus callosum and wind up with 2 distinct, independently communicating personalities within a single head. There's no room left to posit a soul. Because one view of the soul is that it's the ghost in the machine. I have a spirit that is basically guiding and directing this meat sack around the planet, and it's making decisions, and it is the thing that is going to be judged morally as good or bad or whatever. Right. The problem is, take that split brain example, which I've used before. You have 2 personalities in the same brain, they communicate independently, one of them believes in a God, one of them doesn't. Now, does that mean that once upon a time this brain had a soul, and now the soul is completely moved over to one hemisphere and the other hemisphere is just screwed? Does it mean that each of those have half of a soul? None of this actually makes any sense at all. But the bigger issue is that every time you posit some space for a soul, every new discovery that we find about how the brain works closes another door for the soul. And God's not there to open a window. I know they say that when a door closes, somewhere God opens a window. You don't get to posit that. It's the same thing we did with evolution when we talk about this diversity of life where we have common ancestry and then it branches out like a tree. And you're like, but that's where God intervened. Yeah. God flipped this little DNA switch to make humans distinct from the other great apes.
He kills and messes with the sex lives of animals.
Yeah.
That's the main way you would do that.
Yeah. It's, I get it. Okay, you don't believe in God, but you do believe in a soul. If somebody asks you why you believe in something and you tell a story and they say, I don't see what that has to do with the thing you're talking about, it's never going to be good to go on to another story.
Yeah.
If people are looking for evidence. Oh, here's something that happened to me. Because first of all, I do not believe that what you are describing accurately represents what happened. I will believe that it accurately represents what you remember, what is in your mind. It's like when somebody tells me they were abducted by aliens. Do I believe they were abducted by aliens? No. Am I willing to accept that they are convinced they were? Yeah. There seem to be plenty of people who are otherwise rational, and for whatever reason, they've interpreted a certain experience as this was an alien abduction. And I'm fine, you can tell me your story, and when an alien abductee or claimed alien abductee tells me their story, I'm going to say, how does that prove that it was aliens? How does that prove it was aliens?
Sure.
Because that's what skepticism is, asking those questions that most people are too uncomfortable to ask because we're so terrified of not knowing. And some of us are so terrified, or some people are so terrified of not fitting in with everybody else. I don't share your God belief, but I'm spiritual but not religious, or I think there's a soul. You know, don't crucify me the way you will those guys on the Atheist show who are telling you, you know, oh no, you don't have evidence and everything else. I'm kinda on your side, I'm just not, you know, all the way there. It's cowardice, and I don't mean that in the sense that it's a character flaw for the individual, that you're a terrible person. We are all guilty of it almost all the time, and the goal, as far as I can tell, should be, when you're made aware of this, to work to change it.